And that was Hush, sung by Russell Morris and taken from one of the tribute concerts for Lobby Lloyd and Pete Wells, held in Sydney and Melbourne in 2006-2007. Not sure which concert that came from, but the man across the desk from you can probably help. Russell Morris, welcome to Radio Gaga. Take us back to where it all started, Russell. How'd you get into music? Presumably there would have been some pressure on you to get a real job?
No, what happened, I went to Richmond Tech and then moved on to Swinburne Tech, and I started to do a diploma of accountancy, economics and commercial law. And some friends of mine had a band, and they were the guys that I'd known in Richmond Tech. And I would hang out with them. We'd go to parties, and we'd hang out, like sing at the parties and things like that. I'd sing along with everyone. And this slimy little fellow appeared out of nowhere and stole their singer. And this slimy little fellow was Brian Cadd, who would become my friend much later on. And they ended up joining a band called Jackson King. So my friends didn't have a singer. Mm-hmm. So they said to me, why don't you sing with us? And I said, I want to finish what I'm doing at school. Yep. And they said, we'll just do it for Christmas. Do it for that length of time and then go back because we've got some gigs. So I did, and it got under my skin. I really enjoyed it and never went back. And that's, 40-something years ago. And
that became Somebody's Image, is that?
That was Somebody's Image, yes.
Okay, and that was 1966 by my reckoning.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, so the Richmond Tech thing, you were just telling me before we came on air that obviously you were a Richmond boy, you barracked for Richmond, and you even had a win last night. That's all very exciting.
It was very exciting.
Any win's a good win. I'm a Brisbane supporter, I'm not doing too well today, which is no good. So you had a couple of hits, including Hush, which was what we just heard there, although obviously it wasn't that version. And then 68, you took the decision to leave the band and work solo.
That's right, yeah.
And that's pretty gutsy for a 20-year-old. What made you do that?
Well, our drummer, Eric Cairns, who was he was sort of really the founding member of the band, him and Les Goff were the two guys that founded it. Eric had a brain hemorrhage. He didn't die, fortunately, but he was very sick, and we had a stand-in drummer, Steve Hopgood from the Masters Apprentices. Mm-hmm. And we were touring with them, and we were earning like $10 a week, and I'm thinking, why did I leave my education to do this? I'm getting $10 a week and living on the floor of someone's house and things like that. And Steve Hopgood said to me, we were in Adelaide, and he said, you should go solo. I said, no, I can't do that. I couldn't leave the guys. And he said, well, they're planning to leave you. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, he said, not really. He said, but they've left you in an emotional sense. He said, because two of them want to be Max Merritt and the Meteors. That's the music they want to play. Yep. The guitar player wants to be a jazz guitar player, and he won't last long because he wants to get out and play jazz. And he said, the band will only last another 6 months to a year anyway.
So it was more a disintegration rather than
So it was a disintegration. So I decided, I thought, well, and we were up in Sydney, and I thought, I need to see our manager. So I rang our manager, and he was up there with Ronnie Burns. Mm-hmm. He managed Ronnie Burns, and he said, oh, come in, I'm staying at Potts Point. So I went in, and they were staying at the Sheraton Hotel, which to me was like, unbelievable. I couldn't believe this place. And they took me out to dinner. Yep. And they bought me things that I'd never really eaten, oysters. I'd never had oysters. And I had a beautiful lasagna, and I thought, these guys are living like this, and I'm living on the floor of a place and we're eating bananas and yogurt. I thought, this is nuts. Mm. I only thought I was going to do the music thing for a few years, but at least I'm going to live well.
Yep, absolutely.
So I thought, I'll go solo because I think I can do what Ronnie's doing, you know. So I went solo, and everyone tried to talk me out of it. Even Johnny Young, when I first went to him for advice, he virtually said, well, you go back and you're not strong enough to be on your own. You should go play with a band. Billy Thorpe virtually said the same thing. Yep. So I thought, well, stuff you, I'll give it a go. So I did.
Sound like the sort of bloke that will take advice from people like that. So
yeah. So I decided to prove them wrong, and I went solo, and that's how it all started.
Yep. And it was about then you came in contact with your lunch host for today, Molly.
Yeah. No, it was during Somebody's Image. It was our first gig that we came in contact with him. He'd been pestering a band called The Group, which had stolen Ronnie Charles as the singer, and he's been pestering them for years to let him manage them. Yep. And they kept saying, hey, you, Ian, don't give us a break, and laughing. Mm. And because the group felt so guilty about stealing Ronnie, And they didn't want to play 5 sets a night down at Anglesea. They said, would you come down and play 1 set in between?
Mm-hmm.
We can't give you any money, but it'll be some exposure for you.
Yep.
And they're thinking, this is great. They'll get on playing, we can drink. So, unbeknownst to them and to Molly, I spent all my youth down there surfing at Torquay and Anglesea. So I knew so many of the people that were at the gig.
Yep.
We went on stage, and after the first song, the place erupted into bedlam. And Meldrum thought, who the hell are these guys? You know, and he was so impressed.
Yep.
And the reaction, so he came up and grabbed us and said, listen, would you be interested in me managing you?
As a manager, that was your initial involvement with him?
Initial involvement with Ian,
Those guys at the group, they couldn't spell either, could they? They were GROOPs.
Yeah, that's right. They couldn't spell it, dyslexic or something like that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
they were a great bunch of guys, the group. And actual fact, the bit of trivia, the real thing was done by the group.
Okay.
They were the ones that played on it.
I caught that as I was doing the research, and we're going to talk about that now, obviously. It was a fairly significant part of your life, wasn't it, the real thing?
Yeah, well, I, more than Ian, realised that when an artist breaks out, they break out with a record that is incredibly different and significant. It's either a gimmick record or it's a song that just can't be ignored.
Yep.
So I said to Ian, we need to find a song that is really different.
Yep.
Because we'd recorded a couple of songs and I just didn't want to do them. I said, they're just like John Farnham. I said, John Farnham's already a star. Why would I want to be what John is?
Yep.
We need to be something different that'll make people go, gee, I haven't heard that before.
Yeah.
So that's the only way we can do it. And he agreed. So we consciously looked for a song that would be different. I was too scared to write at that stage.
Yeah.
I felt a bit insecure about it. So
how do you go and find the real thing? I mean, Johnny Young wrote it. Apparently, it was intended originally for Ronnie Burns.
No, it wasn't. No.
Okay,
that's what Ronnie says.
Oh, okay.
It was a fortuitous accident that we found it. But what happened? I'd already asked Johnny Young for advice, and he virtually patted me on the head and said, "Oh, when you grow up to be a really big, serious pop star like me, you know, you might. But you're just a little boy. You stay in your band." He denies this to this day, but he did say.
Well, you had to go to Tasmania to get away from it, didn't you?
So the band had broken up, and the last time the Go Show was on TV, they asked me to mime the Somebody's Image song, Hush.
Yep.
And I did, and there was a big live audience, and the audience went nuts. So Johnny Young immediately dollar signs started flashing through his eyes, and I'd virtually walked off stage into the dressing room, and he was waiting for me there because he was on the panel. He'd rushed off the panel. And he said, I've got some songs that you might like to hear. And he played me, and Ian was there, and so was Michael Barnett, who was managing me along with Ian. So he played 3 songs, one of which I said, listen, that's really good. That's a great song. But I don't think it's a song we're looking for. Have you got anything else? And he said, no, not really. He said, I've got this rock and roll song that I've written for a friend's band who's driving me nuts, and I've actually promised them that they can record it. So it wasn't Ronnie Burns, it was this other band. I've forgotten their name now, but I knew way back then.
Yeah.
And it was a band that had never done anything. They were just sort of trying to get their feet off the ground.
Trying to get the breakthrough song.
And he played us the song, and admittedly it was Pictures of Matchstick Men with new lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
But it was different enough. When he finished, Ian and I looked at each other and we said, that's the song. And he went, are you crazy? That's not a solo artist song. We said, that's what we want to do. He said, but what about the other songs? Yeah, those other songs are nice. We will do one of them,
Yep.
but not right now. This is the one we want to do. And he thought we were nuts. Because when he played it just like Pictures of Matchstick Men.
Mm-hmm.
Dang, 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 from start to finish.
Yep.
And to give credit where credit's due, Ian Meldrum, after he heard it, got Johnny to play it again, and he said, I know what we're going to do with this song. And he was the total architect of the way it should go.
Yep.
And he was the one that decided that it was going to be like Hurdy-Gurdy Man meets I'm the Walrus, sort of.
And it said, I read somewhere that I'm the Walrus is one of the inspirations for you as well, and it's something you play quite a bit.
Yes, I've always... Well, I love the Beatles, but I love I'm the Walrus.
Yep.
Mainly because of the chords.
Mm-hmm.
The chords are so... Like, Lennon wasn't a natural musician. He was a brilliant songwriter and beautiful melody guy, but chord-wise, he didn't do... But the chords on that, to me, are very, very clever.
Yeah.
Something that I would never even think about trying... If I wrote a song, I wouldn't go to those chords.
Yeah.
And they're just great.
Yeah, so
really.
it was quite a distinctive sound, wasn't it?
Oh, incredible.
Yeah, yeah. And The Real Thing went 6 minutes 20, which in itself was a bit unusual in those days.
Not initially. It was meant to go for 3.5 minutes.
Oh, okay.
And the band, the group, when they got to the end of the song, they were so relieved because they only took about 8 takes to get it.
Okay.
But when they got to the end, they were so relieved that the drummer did a fill and they went into double time.
Yep.
And the engineer went to push the button and say, okay, and Ian said, no, let them play. Just let them play. We'll fade it. They just kept playing and playing and playing and playing, and then the drummer just gave up and went, that, go, boom, and threw his sticks down. And we all laughed, and Ian said, it's all right, we'll fade it at some stage. And then that night, actually, he rang me late at night, because I was living with my grandmother and stepfather and Mum. Nana said, oh, Ian's on the phone. It's 2:00 in the morning, for God's sake. So I get on the phone, he said, I've got this fantastic idea.
Yep.
I said, what? He said, we're going to make the record 6.5 minutes long. And I said, how? He said, the end bit. He said, we'll keep the end bit. I said, Ian, it just goes on and on and on. It's boring. He said, no, we'll put sound effects in there and we'll tweak with it.
Yep.
Trust me. He said, let's give it a go. And I said, yeah, okay, let's go for it, you know.
Yep.
And admittedly, I thought, oh, this is a bit stretching the bow a little bit.
Yeah.
But he did. A few things happened just as accidents at the end, but worked out really, really well.
Yeah, and the radio stations, how do you convince radio stations who are in a 3-minute format to play something that's twice that length?
Well, the record company hated it. They thought it was the biggest load of garbage they'd ever heard in their lives. And they were only going to release it in Melbourne.
Yep.
So we drove to Sydney and went to see the radio stations there and saw the programmers. In those days, you could do that.
Yep.
Now, it's lucky if you can get to the front desk to talk to anyone.
Yep.
And the programmers said, well, what do you want? And we said, we want you to listen to this and tell us if you'd play it. Why? Because EMI think it's a load of garbage. And that immediately they go, all right,
excellent.
Okay, let me.
Yep.
And they'd listen to it and go, this is fantastic. So they all signed petitions that they would play it.
Yep.
So EMI had to release it. And radio, in a way, wanted to stick it to EMI as well.
Okay, yeah. Yep.
So they absolutely jumped on it.
I suppose also it's the equivalent of 2 songs, isn't it? So they just make it easy. If you were 7.5 minutes, it might have been tricky.
Well, it allowed all the jocks to go to the toilet or make a cup of tea.
Oh, two-thirds of the way through this program, you'll find a lengthy song. Don't worry about that. It's one of the tricks.
Yeah.
We're going to play a lengthy song now. It's called The Real Thing. In fact, officially called The Real Thing Parts 1 and 2. I didn't realise that.
That's right.
Because Part 3 is into paper walls.
Yeah, well, it was called Parts 1 and 2 because we were worried that radio wouldn't like it. And when it was first initially done, it was supposed to be cut like an EP with the little gap in the middle.
Yes.
And radio was to watch the needle, which was used in those days. And once it got to that gap, it was at their discretion if they wanted to fade it or to let it go on.
Okay.
But everyone let it go on.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's 26 minutes past 3 and you're on Radio Gaga, 94.1 FM 3WBC. Our very, very special in-studio guest, the voice you've been hearing, is Russell Morris. We're about to hear him sing now. Not literally, we're going to hear a CD playing, hear him sing. It's 26 minutes past. Here he is, Russell Morris with The Real Thing. There's The Real Thing by Russell Morris, and he is our in-studio guest here this afternoon on Radio Gaga 94.1 FM 3WBC. Just heard an absolute classic of Australian music. Not only featured yourself, Russell, but a number of other well-known musicians. We talked about the group being involved. Roger Hicks from Zoot was there.
That's right.
Brian Cadd, Ronnie Charles, Don Moody from the group. And there was a female singer who came in there towards the end. Don't tell us who it is. She had a top 5 hit in Australia in 1975. Now, the first person who can text me through on the following number, so get your pens ready, folks. The first person who can identify that singer and the song that she had as the number one, or the top five it wasn't number one, the female singer and the name of the song to 04 4800 9800. That's 04 4800 9800 will win a copy of Russell's recent album, Jumpstart Diary. And I've got to tell you, great album. And I will be playing a couple of songs from that shortly. But first one through with the name of that female singer on 04 4800 9800 will win a copy of that. And I'm sure Russell wouldn't mind scribbling his name on it for us when the time comes.
Definitely.
Excellent. So it's a signed copy. It's the stakes are getting higher. Yeah. So what are your recollections of recording the song? You've told us a bit about the who was there and the extension and stuff. Whereabouts did it take place, all of that recording?
Took place in Armstrong Studios in Albert Road, Albert Park. And people think there were a cast of thousands on it, but there were only Don Moody on guitar, Richard Wright drums, Roger Hicks on guitar, Brian Cadd on piano.
Okay.
That was it.
And the female singer being dubbed over the top.
And then there was a couple of female singers.
Okay.
And Molly Meldrum, of course, and some of the voices at the end, when you hear Winston Churchill, that was Ian going, "We will bite them on the beaches, we will bite them on the landing grounds." That was him, but we had the tapes of the choirs and all that we lumped in there. And then the Brian Cadd, Ian said, "You're funny, Brian. Go into the studio and do something funny." And Brian said, "What? How am I going to do something funny?" And he said, "Just go and do something funny." And as he was walking into the studio, the engineer looked at him and raised his eyebrows and he said, "Oh, here's something funny." He handed him a tape box, a TAC tape box. Mm-hmm. And on the back is all the warranty.
Yeah.
And that's that voice that's reading that out. Brian's voice going, "And the user of the product, and the user of the product will certify the product. The father of the user of the..." All that sort of stuff. That's Brian.
Reading a warranty box.
Yeah, and in the second verse, which is quite funny, Molly was trying to tell me how to sing, which was really aggravating me to no end.
But he's great. He's known for his voice, isn't he?
Oh, well, we had quite a few fights, like fist fights. And I said, "All right, you're so great. You go and do it. You show me. Show me how to sing it." And he was in a corner. He said, "Okay." So we went out. And he sort of sang one of the verses, and we were laughing. We were laying on the ground, holding our stomachs. And he came in. He said, "Oh, stop it. You know what I mean. You know what I mean." So I went out and I sang my verse. We came back in. We played it back. The engineer had forgotten to wipe his vocal from the other track. Mm-hmm. And it came out at the same time as mine. And it sounded so unusually bizarre that we kept it in. So if you listen really quiet, listen carefully, in the second verse you can hear a voice behind me. It sounds like phasing, mm-hmm. but it's another voice going, "Come and see the real thing, come and see the..." That's Meldrum's version of singing. And you can hear it, and it's sort of out of time as well, so you can pick it up when it gets out of time.
Okay. Yeah. So he has recorded a song, and
yes.
He wouldn't be on the singing credits, I would hope.
No.
Now, one of the other things I've only listened to the song a million times in my life, but going through and doing the research for this, found out that, in fact, that the singing in the background is by Hitler Youth, and the last words uttered in the song are, in fact, Sieg Heil.
Yeah, that's right.
How did that go down in 1969? We're in the middle of a war at that stage. I mean, does that...
I think we're pretty naive. We didn't even think about it. It was just a hodgepodge of a soup of things that went together. And the song was supposed to be about ego. And we picked those people because they were supremely egotistical. Mm. Even Winston Churchill saved the Western world, I guess. But he was a supremely egotistical man. Mm. Same with Adolf Hitler. And we were pointing out, I guess, that ego can really destroy a lot of things. You've got to have ego, though. You've got to have an ego. But it was all to do with... It was sort of confused sort of message that we're getting across. We never even thought about anything to do with the Jewish question, which was probably a bit not a great thing to do, you know. We didn't even think about that because we never thought about it. Because a lot of our friends... Well, one of my managers was Jewish. He never said anything. Michael Barnett never said, "Hey, I don't know if this is a good idea," you know. And Jeff Joseph was one of my managers prior to that. And all of them loved it. None of them said, "Oh, this is not a good idea," you know. Because I
went onto YouTube and had a look, and there's actually a piece of footage of the... Hitler Youth singing that particular piece of music.
Oh, is there really?
Which is called Die Jugendmarschheit, which means Youth on the March. I don't know whether you knew that or not. So, in fact, you know, the piece of footage is there, and it sounds like a bunch of school kids singing, like, you know, a football song. I mean, it really is very sort of innocent in lots of ways, and yet in lots of ways, obviously, you know, had a really bad undertone.
Well, particularly for Jewish and Polish and Russian and Gypsies, people have pretty significant effect, but we didn't even look upon it as being distasteful. It was very strange that we didn't even that question didn't even come up till 2 years after it had been released. No one mentioned it when it came out. And I have to blame radio for this, because one of my dear friends was a radio guy, Dick Hemming, and he was the guy that provided all the records, sound effects. But the only sound effects he had were German. So that's how that sort of happened. If he had have had Americans, we probably would have put that on, you know, and things, you know.
Yeah. Oh, well. Now, we've had Mike Rudd from Spectrum in here as a Dead Set legend, and also Ross Ryan, and both of those guys have had one absolute monster hit, Mike with Spectrum with I'll Be Gone, and Ross with I Am Pegasus. I asked them the same question. I'll ask you the same question. In the long term, has having a song of that size been a really good thing to have first off, or a hindrance to have first off, like always having to meet that standard coming up with your next hit?
If Wings of an Eagle and Sweet Sweet Love hadn't have been hits, I probably would have said yes, but it gave me my foot up, and strangely enough, oddly enough now, if I perform live, the song that gets the biggest reaction out of everything is Sweet Sweet Love.
Okay.
That's the one that people will absolutely cheer for. They all love The Real Thing, of course, but the Sweet Sweet Love is the one that really nails it for me, which is, so I'm sort of happy about that.
Yeah.
So I would have absolutely, if it was only one song, it's like saying to John Farnham, how would you feel if you never had You're the Voice and you only had Sadie, which would be enough to throw yourself under a train, I think.
Absolutely,
you know?
yeah.
And that's why he never did it, because he was sort of embarrassed about it for such a long time.
Yeah. Well,
but I'm not embarrassed about The Real Thing.
Do you still enjoy playing it?
Yes, I love playing it. If the crowd enjoy it.
Yep.
If the crowd were yawning all the way through it, I'd just dump it. I wouldn't do it.
Yeah. No, well, I saw Spectrum out at Moonee Valley in January, went out and saw Mike and the boys play out there. And some guy walked up to him at the first break, you know, because you walk up to these guys at the first break, and he said, "Would you mind doing I'll Be Gone? I've got to go."
Oh, yeah, isn't that great? People, I've got to leave. Can you do it for me?
Yeah, and so Mike said, "I'm going to announce the name of Brian," or whatever Brian's name was, or whatever. Brian's leaving now, folks. So we're going to play I'll Be Gone. I'm sorry for those of you who, you know, Mike's sense of humour, you know, sorry about those guys that, you know, actually want to hear it later in the show. And I got that sense that because it is the song that's identified with them, and the same with Ross and I Am Pegasus. I sat at a Ross Ryan event, same venue. Sounds like I hang around Moonee Valley a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I sat there for an hour and a quarter or so. I Am Pegasus didn't come anywhere near the top of the list, and yet it was a great day. I mean, he's got so much more than just that one song, but of course you just associate the one song. So obviously, you know, it got to run in the dish.
Yes.
And it got to run as an AFL song. Do you got a problem with the iconic song being used in a commercial venture like that, or is that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah?
Not so much a movie.
Yeah.
But I don't like ads. I can't stand them. You know.
Yeah.
The only if an ad is tasteful, I can handle it, but I just couldn't handle the fact that things like when they did the SPC one, The Real Thing, it was horrifying. You know? Things like that I don't really like. I wouldn't mind it being, because they use songs now tastefully in certain ads, and they just use the song. They don't change the words.
Yeah. You know? Well, it's being used for Western Australia as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
At one stage there.
Yeah,
so
that's okay.
And that's got that's got a good ring.
Yeah.
Well, that was your first number one, and your second number one. And I was surprised. Now, you only had two number ones in the Australian charts. Was a song called "The Girl That I Love," which was on the back of Part 3 Paper Walls.
That's right.
And it also went to number one. I think we might listen to that now, if I can hit the right CD. I'm sorry about that before, folks. You're listening to Radio Gaga on 94.1 FM 3WBC, and I've got Russell Morris as our in-studio guest. Welcome back to 94.1 FM 3WBC. You're listening to Radio Gaga, and our special guest today is Russell Morris, and we have just heard from him, The Girl That I Love. Now, very good work there by David of Burwood, who wins the signed version of Jumpstart Diary. It was, in fact, Maureen Elkner who had that hit in 1975, and that was Rack Off Normie. One of the truly great pieces of Australian music. I don't think you could get much more of a contrast, could you, in terms of... So, after that, you had some more hits with Sweet Sweet Love, Wings of an Eagle, Rachel, all those sorts of songs that were huge over a period of, 2 or 3 years, and then you decided to move over to the UK and then to the US. Which of those songs is your favourite, of the Russell Morris songs of that era?
Probably Wings of an Eagle.
Okay.
Yeah.
For what reason? Any particular reason?
Because I captured... Sometimes when you're trying to write a song, you don't capture all what you're trying to say and make it poetic. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it becomes too sort of... The cup was on the table and she knocked it over and there was coffee laying on the table. That sort of specific stuff,
yep.
Which I don't tend to write. I tend it to be more poetic and vague. Mm-hmm. The problem is sometimes I get too abstract and people have no idea what I'm writing about. In the case of Wings of an Eagle, no one really knew what it was about. But the really interesting part was people would come up to me over the years. I must have had 100 people come up to me and say, "Oh, listen, I love your songs. I hope you don't mind. My father died recently, or my brother died, or my sister died, or my mother died, and I hope you don't mind, but we chose Wings of an Eagle to play at the funeral." I said, "Oh, that's fantastic." And they said, "By the way, what's it about?" And the thing that really struck me is there is a subliminal communication there sometimes between human beings. The song is about death. Mm. It's about an Aboriginal legend that I heard about, and an Indian legend, Red Indian legend, that before they die, a sea eagle, in the case of the Darwin Aborigines, will come and take their spirit to Dreamtime. Okay. Same with the Red Indians. It was like the bald eagle would take their spirit to Dreamtime. Mm-hmm. But a lot of people didn't know that that's what it was about. And yet they've got that sense. Yet they chose it for a funeral.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's my most pleasing one, whereas Sweet Sweet Love is just a straight love song, but there's no hidden meaning in it. But in Wings of an Eagle, there was a hidden meaning, and people found the hidden meaning but didn't understand why they found it.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So to me, that was the most satisfied I've been with one of my songs.
Excellent. Okay. So you moved overseas, as we said. Why did we move overseas? Any particular reason to go over, or was this time to do something different?
Time to do something different, and plus I was encouraged by Paul Dainty, who wanted to manage me and take me overseas and trying to get me a record deal and that sort of thing. And it's like, if you play football, you want to go and try and play in a bigger team,
yep.
You know. And it was that ambitious thing, and there was so many things that went wrong overseas. One of them is I can't believe sitting here today talking to you, something has come up which I realised could have been the demise of the real thing in America, because it made the charts in a number of states.
Mm-hmm. It was number one in New York, as I remember.
Yeah. But I hadn't thought about it until you said, "Oh, parts 1 and 2." And then I realised what had happened. In America, we were on a little tiny independent label, which was being distributed by one of the major labels. And at that stage, the major labels were trying to stamp out the little labels, and they weren't giving them support that they needed.
Yep.
Distribution wouldn't go out. But Johnny Young and their publishers had a deal with this label, Diamond. I hadn't thought about it. It just rang a bell. I'm going to ring Molly when I finish here.
You heard it first here, folks, on Radio Gaga.
It rang a bell. What they did, they said to Diamond, "We want the A and the B side," because at that stage we had a Hans Poulsen song on the B side out in Australia called "It's Only a Matter of Time." But they wanted all the money. So they said, "We want the A and the B side, so we want part 1 on one side and part 2 on the other
side." Yeah.
And I reckon that's part of what killed it.
That'd be a bit messy to halfway. Stop, hang on, we're going to turn over that would be
That
absurd.
is unbelievable. And I just, when you said parts 1 and parts 2, and I thought, where does that ring a bell? And I thought, oh, that's right. It was released in America with part 1 on one side and part 2 on the other. And then I started to think about it, and I thought, that's why it was done, because Johnny Young's publishing company E.H. Morris or whatever it was, would have wanted both sides.
Well, there you are.
Because I remember it was them that set up the deal with the record company.
The hard-hitting journalistic style that I present.
That's right. You've twigged something in me.
Look out, here I come. Look out, Neil Mitchell. Okay, so you came back to Australia. You got together with Daryl Cotton from Zoot and Ronnie Burns from Ronnie Burns.
That's right.
And created the cleverly named Cotton Burns and Morris to start playing. What kicked that off?
A total accident again.
Mm-hmm.
The music business is fraught with terrible train crashes, and this was one of them. Daryl was working in Kew, and Michael, a friend that was running the club, said to Daryl, listen, let's do something different this week. Why don't you ring up some of your friends and get them to come down and sing? So Daryl rang me and said, would you want to come and sing 4 or 5 songs with me? And he rang Ron. Mm-hmm. And we said, yeah, we'll do it. So we went down. It was a huge crowd.
Yeah.
People loved it. So they rang us back the next week and said, listen, will you do it again in a month? And we said, oh, yeah, we had a good time. We'll do it again in a month. And it was a night, one of those hellish winter nights. The rain was pelting. It was freezing cold. And I thought, this will be shocking. There'll be no one there. It'll be horrible. We get there, and the people were lined up round the block. It was huge. They
Whereabouts was that?
them all in. Casey's.
Okay, yep.
So we did the show, and then we met the next week and said, why don't we do this for 3 months? See what pans out.
Yep.
And that took off.
Yep.
Went through the roof. And then Ronnie decided to move to Tasmania. He moved to Tasmania, and I suggested to Daryl to get Jim Keys, because Jim had been a mate of mine for years. And I wanted Jim in the band even prior to Ronnie leaving, because I thought Jim would add more grunt with his songs, make it more rock and roll, less cabaret.
Yep.
And so Jimmy joined, and we've been with Jimmy now for 7 years.
Excellent. Because Ronnie would have gone through the stage, of course, of stopping being Ronnie Burns and starting to become Lauren Burns' dad, wouldn't he?
He did for a little while, yeah. Well, I would have wanted to be a dad too. She was so good.
Yeah, every time you turned, he was on as Lauren's dad.
Yeah, well, he was managing it too. You
know.
Oh,
okay. Yeah, fair enough.
She's a gorgeous girl. She's a lovely person. Yeah.
Well, I think I'm right in saying, now here's a piece of musical trivia, almost up there with Maureen Elkner. Jim Keys, I think I'm right in saying, was the first person ever to record a particular song that is now played on a weekly basis. Now, I should throw that open for a CD as well. He, I think, was the first person to record the new Brisbane Lions theme song, We Are the Pride of Brisbane Town.
He wrote it, yeah. He wrote the lyrics, yeah. Yep. And he also wrote the Melbourne Victory.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, there you are. Cause
he's the king of football themes.
Kevin Murray introduced it at Dallas Brooks Hall in 1996 to a group of disgruntled Fitzroy supporters, and we hear it regularly. I got a funny feeling we won't be hearing it after today's game, but that's okay. So in 2007, Jumpstart Diary, we've talked a bit about it. First non-compilation album in 16 years?
Yeah, it is. I think it's about then, because I'm not sure when Thousand Suns was done. And to me, that was the best album I'd ever done. Mm-hmm. And it sunk without a trace. And so I thought, well, I'm not going to record any more albums. I'm not interested. Yep. People won't buy them. People won't play them. So I didn't.
Yep.
The only thing I did was compilations with Cotton Keys and Burns, Cotton and Morris, put all the old things. And then I got approached by Liberation to do a compilation of acoustic hits,
Yep.
So I did that. And that did very well.
That's Fundamentalist, wasn't it?
Fundamentalist. So I was encouraged, and I thought, I'll just keep writing. I just kept writing. And Peter Robinson, who I wrote with, he said, you should do this and sell it at gigs. And I said, I'm not interested, Peter. I don't want to do another album. He said, you should sit down one day and just listen to the songs.
Yep.
So I did. I went home and I sat and listened, and I thought, gee, yeah, there's some good songs there. And I rang him and I said, that's not a bad idea. I said, but we need to write 4 more songs. It's just not quite strong enough yet. So we wrote 4 more songs. 3 of them made it onto the album. The last one didn't. And then Pete had been mixing it, and I just said, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to get someone in my area, a guy in Box Hill, who was a genius sound mixer, I think, to mix the album. Pete at first was a little bit hurt. And then after he heard the first mix, he went, I understand. So that was mixed by a guy who's local here, and he did a wonderful job.
Excellent. Yeah. Okay, well, we're going to hear one track from. In fact, we're going to hear 2 tracks from it, and then we're going to come back and send you on your way, because we appreciate the air you've given us. The first song we're going to hear is called "Do It From Me." I have actually heard the album a couple of times. I bought it from a very reputable website, russellmorris.com.au, I think is the
Some
name.
people would say it's disreputable. Yeah.
We'll revisit that in a moment. But I've heard the album, and not because he took you to lunch. I've got to have a Molly moment here and say, do yourself a favour. It's a really, really good album. And it's got Russell Morris written all over, but it doesn't, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I tried them. Well, I started doing the songs because I was trying to get other people to do the songs.
Yep.
I wasn't writing for me.
Yep.
So it's a whole bunch of songs that I was trying to get other people to record. No one did, so I did it myself.
I didn't ask me. All right, we're going to hear now Do It For Me. You're listening to 94.1 FM 3WBC.
Hi, this is Russell Morris, and you're listening to Radio Gaga on 94.1 FM 3WBC.
Strangest feelings, and sometimes like I'm about to fall. Some nights I wake up in a fever. Sometimes it's like I've hit the wall. Can you see I'm still running? Feel stronger than before. Some say that the getting's worth the waiting, but some days, you know, I can't even score. Can you see I'm still running? Can you feel it's still coming? I tell myself everything is fine. Get your mind right, get your mind right. Come on, get your mind right. And I tell myself everything has its time. Pieces come together. Better late than never. The moment is forever. I'm keeping my faith, 'cause you carry it with you the day you're born. I'm keeping my faith, 'cause it's always darkest before the dawn. I'm keeping my faith, 'cause tomorrow is written on the page that's torn. I'm keeping my faith, keeping my faith. I'm keeping my faith. I'm keeping my faith. And I tell myself everything
And there was Get Your Mind Right by Russell Morris, and before that, Do It For Me, both off the new album Jumpstart Diary. Russell has been our guest for the last hour, and it's been really good having you here, Russell. Thanks for taking the time out of your Sunday afternoon to come and talk to us.
Thanks, Neil.
Now, that Jumpstart Diary, as I said before, a really good album. I'm not just saying that because you're within arm's reach and you'll whack me in the ear if I don't. But you can get it at all good record stores, presumably some bad ones as well, but
That's
more
right.
importantly, at www.russellmorris.com.au.
That's right, or J&B.
JB's got it.
JB
Yep.
Hi-Fi's got it, yeah.
The really good thing, though, folks, about going to the websites of these guys that come in and give up their time is the money goes straight to them and cuts out the retail bit. So why not support the guys, go to their website. The other good thing on Russell's website, russellmorris.com.au with all the W's, is it's got a list of where Russell's going to be playing next. He is the busiest man in the world, it would appear, but judging by his list of dates.
Yeah. Well, that's under tours. You just have to press tours, and
Yep.
that just shows you where I'm working either solo or with Daryl Cotton and Jim Keys,
Yep.
or with Brian Cadd.
Okay, so you're off to Queensland, you said, this week?
Yeah, I go to Queensland on Friday. I'm up there with Brian.
Yep.
Then I come back and I'm with Daryl and Jim next week. We do Wellers and Greensborough, RSL, I think it is, and a couple of others. Then I'm back up to Queensland, I think, with Brian. No, to Perth with Brian. And then Melbourne, second week of June. Melbourne Country, third week of June. Sydney, fourth week of June.
Okay, so there's a really good opportunity there in May and in June to see Russell doing his work, either with Brian or with Daryl and with Jim. So make sure you get along. And if you are getting along to the session and you're talking to Russell, tell him you heard him on Radio Gaga. It'll give him a bit of a kick, and he'll no doubt give you a special smile or something from the stage.
I definitely will. Yeah.
Russell, it's been absolutely fantastic having you here. Thanks very much for giving up your time. We're going to hear a bit more music now from Exile this time, Kiss You All Over, and we'll say goodbye to Russell. Thanks, Russell.
Thanks, Neil. Ta, mate.